Okay.
Cool. I think we have a few viewers lined up, so let's just quickly start the session. So initially I'd just like to thank you for joining the session, and I would also like to thank everyone who's joining us today. So this is our first inaugural Big Time SaaS session that we've gathered, and so far it's looking pretty successful, and we've had really good engagement. And in that line, we also have Shruti Kapoor here, who's the CEO of Wingman. And Wingman is a company that helps you sell better with intelligent insights. And Shruti will talk about it a little towards the end. Shruti comes from a really cool background, as she has worked across cool fields like life science research, investment banking, technology investing, product development, fintech, and many others, I believe. She also has graduated from Indian Institution of Ahmedabad, and he has a master's in business administration. So Shruti will cover the most and the least scary sales objective that people in SaaS face today. And all these points that she's covering are backed by insights from 2 million minutes of sales calls analyzed by Wingman. So it is of really great value, and we hope that it helps all the audiences who are from a sales background or who are looking to improve their sales team get a very good, insightful update on it. And I'll leave Shruti to give more detail. The floor is yours, Shruti.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Anand. Really excited to be here. I know that I know that the session just before this was Nathan Latka's session, so that's a hard one to follow on. But yeah, excited to be here. And so the way I would want to run this, and it would be great if we can keep this participative, is to help both answer questions based on the data and the best practices that we've seen across different sales teams, both in the US and in India that we work with. And of course, a lot of the insights and the answers will also come from the data itself from the calls that we've analyzed, right? So let's dive into it, because we do have a fair amount of data and 2 million minutes
and the energy bar is set a bit high after Latka.
I know. Yeah, and so of course, the topic that I chose was most and least scary sales objections. I know Anand also put out a poll there for the same. I would love to hear what are some of the objections that you personally think are scariest, both in terms of handling them and in terms of how you think they impact your sales outcomes. So when we, speak to a lot of sales reps, an objection that comes up very often, and what people believe comes up very often in sales calls, especially if you're doing cold outreach, is simply that I'm not interested, right? And that's often almost a blanket statement that people say to escape out of being on the phone, put down the phone and carry on with the rest of their day. So what we wanted to do today was look at how some of those things impact actual outcomes. Of course, big kind of caveat here is it's always going to be hard to say whether correlation is actually causation, right? So what we are going to present here is correlations between deal win rates or deal loss rates. And what was spoken about in the deal. We can argue about whether or not that might actually be the cause, or that might just be, a side effect or a symptom, right? So would also love to hear some of those questions. So the first big thing was simply, if a blocker is mentioned, is that already a bad sign, right? If your customer comes in and says any of the blockers, right, whether that's not interested or timing is not good or budget or whatever else, is that at a high level a bad place to be in? And what we saw with what the data says is that it actually improves your win rate, right? So if someone talks about a blocker, that means that one, they've considered you enough to even talk about a blocker, right? And two, if somebody mentions a blocker, what we often see is that it's also a good opportunity for the salesperson to go back and address the blocker. right? So, while the percentage difference looks small, right? But if you look at 7.27%, as an increase in the baseline, it's a pretty significant jump, right? And just so at a high level, right, the strategy that a lot of teams have successfully adopted is to preemptively try and close the deal to help the sales, to help the customer actually talk about their blockers, right? So if I were to put the customer in a position to say, hey, are you okay if we were to sign this, or if we were to go ahead, is there anything on your mind, right? If I were to ask that question somewhere before the end of a sales call, right, there's a much better chance that the customer will actually talk about a blocker, and that will give me an opportunity to make sure that I understand where they are in their head and address it, right? So high level, it's not a bad thing if somebody talks about a blocker. The one blocker, though, that one should be worried about is budget. So what we've seen is if someone comes in and says that, I don't have the budget for this, it does seem to increase your deal loss rates pretty significantly. And just in case you're wondering, like, if deal win rates are 5.7% and deal loss rates are 5.5%, then, basically all of the other deals in this scenario are in the open stage or, kind of basically currently in progress, right? And all of us see that at any point in time, most of the deals remain in that stage. And the other good thing, while it's jumping so dramatically, the good thing here is that at least you will get a decision sooner, right? Having a deal in limbo is probably worse than it being lost, because at least then you can move on and focus your energies on the next thing. So while this, while the fact that it increases your loss rates is bad, the good thing is that if you're able to bring this out quickly enough, right, and you're able to make the decision on whether or not this is a temporary budget freeze or a temporary budget blocker, or whether this is going to be like a situation for the foreseeable future, then you know which direction to take. Because if you go back and look at the data, it actually doesn't decrease your win rates, right? So you still have a pretty good chance of winning the deal, even if somebody spoke about budget.
Correct. Makes sense.
Thanks. And the so of course the other thing that people often talk about is trust, right? So how would a prospect kind of mention the trust blocker? So the first thing to remember here is that trust is something that people are mostly uncomfortable talking about, right? So even a prospect will not be very comfortable challenging you and asking you a question to say, directly say that I don't trust you, right? More often it will be under the hood of something like, hey, what is the size of your team? How much funding do you have? How many customers do you have, right? So those type of questions. But even those questions, right, together come in less than 1% of the call, right? So it's something that people are pretty hesitant to talk about. But what we've observed is that it's something that is very much in their minds, right? And the interesting thing here is that whether or not trust gets mentioned, it doesn't impact your win or loss rates as much as the fact that it just means that your deals are going to be stalled, right? So where it is mentioned, there's a higher chance that the deal is just going to be in that open stage, and probably because people don't even trust you enough to come and tell you that they're not going to move forward, right? And one of the things to overcome this is to very early on just preempt this, because even when people are not talking about this, in 100% of the time, right, this is somewhere in their mind, right, unless you're already a big established brand. So trust me on this. This is something on people's mind, and the way to address this preemptively is to talk about whatever credentials you can to help build trust, right? Whether that is, if you're really early stage, I think the biggest trust factor that people want you to establish is, are you going to be around a year from now, right? If you are a little bit more later stage, then they want to know, what customers have you already served and are they happy with your solution, right? And then, I think as your stage changes, that baseline of trust also keeps going up. Any questions here? Please feel free to put it on chat. Sorry, I'm kind of on the slides, so I might not see it immediately. And then what about timing, right? So timing actually is something that comes up really often. So if you remember, trust came up in less than 1% of the calls. Timing actually comes up in close to a quarter of the calls, right? So the good thing is that like we saw in the baseline data, right? Just because a blocker is being mentioned isn't a bad sign. And this one is actually pretty common. And the good thing with it is that, where timing is mentioned, your win rates are actually going up, right? And they're going up 30%. So the way to handle this and the way to, kind of deal with this in your teams is to make sure that if a timing related blocker gets mentioned, you are consistent in your follow-ups with the prospect, right? Just because somebody said that, hey, sorry, I can't do it this quarter, doesn't mean that they're just shrugging you off. Yes, in some cases they might be, but very often that's probably a reasonable, real objection, and they might be open to actually talking to you next quarter and going ahead with it, right? So don't kind of let those deals just kind of sit in the CRM. Make sure that you are following up and that you have set up your tasks and reminders to go back to them. So this is kind of a quick summary on the blockers. Would love to see maybe a few more responses on what people's own experiences have been with blockers. And then, the other thing that we wanted to question was all of the different so-called best practices, right? So, people, when you start thinking about your sales playbook, people tell you, hey, you know what, I've used the Sandler methodology, or we always do this, or, this is how we set up meetings. So we basically took some of those well-known best practices and put them here, and we tried to use the data to get a verdict on, whether or not those best practices help or hurt in closing deals. Right. So the first one here is setting the agenda, right? So what we mean by setting the agenda is at the start of the call, would you say something like, hey, the agenda for this call is, or, in this call, we want to talk about ABC, right? And the whole point of setting the agenda is so that you get a buy-in from the person, and you're also in some sense able to preemptively tell them that you will be setting up next steps, or so that as they go through that meeting, they know that that's the objective that you'll come back and ask them for, right? The other reason why people set the agenda and the language that they use for it is to talk about giving an opportunity to the customer to express their concerns, right? Or to win the trust of the customer in saying that we'll together try to evaluate whether or not the solution is a good fit for you. All right. Otherwise, very often it's easy to go into a demo or into your own pitch, and the customer is kind of just left wondering for themselves, is this going to fit my use case, right? So if you expressly state the agenda, you're able to actually create a space for doing that discussion and evaluation together. So the great thing with agenda is this is actually the one biggest factor that we saw, which impacts your win rates so significantly, right? Your win rates are more than double if people have talked about the agenda, right? Now, while agenda setting might seem like a really small thing, I think the broader takeaway here is that it's good practice to set up some markers and best practices in your own sales playbook and process, right? Even if some of them seem really basic, it's a good idea to go ahead and try to implement those both in your own conversations and as you onboard new sales reps. The other question that we had was, does problem-based work, right? Problem-based selling, meaning, if I talk about things like, hey, the problem that my solution addresses, or the challenge that we are looking to solve, right? Versus directly jumping into saying, hey, Wingman, analyzes all these calls. And what we saw was that problem-based selling was also a pretty strong, had also a pretty strong impact on improving win rates. right? So again, that's something to coach your team on, and to make sure that people are orienting the discussion around a problem that your solution addresses rather than just the solution. And of course, everybody in sales talks about ABC, always be closing. And so what we wanted to see was, if people are mentioning things like contracts or quote, or, basically things that you would consider as closing signals in calls, does it actually impact win rates? The good news is that it does, right? But honestly, if you look at it, it's still, the win rates are still less than 10%, right? So just because you were able to have a discussion around, commitment and quotes and contracts, etc., doesn't mean that the deal is as good as done, right? It's important to keep that number in perspective, especially because, a lot of times reps tend to have the happy years problem, and they get a bit complacent once, they hear any of those things. And this is actually the last one on practices, right? And we've all heard a lot of chatter about talk to listen ratio, and how we should all be talking with one mouth and listening with two ears, especially on sales calls. The interesting thing that we saw here was, honestly, while there was a little bit of improvement if the talk to listen ratio was low, in most, it's very similar to the baseline, right? So it doesn't actually matter as much whether you're talking less or listening more. I think it at least in terms of a correlation, it doesn't seem to hold up, right? So I wouldn't say that I would, start going on a long monologue and just hounding the mic on my next sales call, but definitely something for people to keep in mind, as not something that they should worry about a lot, right? And yeah, maybe with that, I will try to improve my talk to listen ratio for this session, and open the floor for a few questions.
Perfect. So these were all really interesting insights, and I need to address the important thing again to everyone who's so 2 million minutes of sales calls to be precise. So all these are backed by data, and these are really useful insights that any one of you can use in your sales call next, even today. So imagine you want to go on a sales call today, just try out these things, see if there are any particular blockers that you're facing that should be mentioned. Maybe that might help you make another convincing sales pitch, or make the customer take a convincing call on your pitch. And to Shruti, I think we have a couple of questions. The first one is from Abhi Anbalagan, and he wanted to know about the traditional bandwidth, like your opinion on the traditional bandwidth, the budget, authority, need, and timeline. Right. I'm not sure what exactly he wants to know, but according to you, how do you think that affects a sales pitch? Because I'm sure every customer will have their budget, and there would be different blockers in terms of authority and need and timeline. So right. What would be a good metric that you've seen so far?
Yeah, so I think, Abhi, maybe two ways to think about this question. And we actually did churn the data, not just for blockers, but also how does asking qualification questions impact win rates, right? So the first thing is asking qualification questions actually significantly lowers your rates of deals that are just open and, just zombies in the system. Right. So it reduces that significantly. Right now, within the different qualification questions, I think, of course, it will vary a bit with your context and your industry, right? And that's something to definitely be aware of and not take any data, overall. The one metric that we saw was a good indicator of, or showed us improvement in qualification in win rates, was qualification around budget, right? So if people spoke about budget related, if you asked your customer budget related qualification questions, your win rates improved, by 80%. So that is definitely something to keep in mind. The other type of qualification questions, one thing that we saw was that they were also very, very infrequent, right? So even if you think about the different qualification questions, the qualification question around need actually happens in only like 0.5% of all calls, which is, very stark, right? And we can see why, because it's a bit hard for people to really dive deep into it. But that's also the reason why it's so important and useful. And we saw that that just doesn't happen often enough for the data to even be meaningful. Like it's happening in less than 0.5% of the calls. So even if you, compare it with any type of benchmark, right, it's kind of really, really low. I think you had another question around how do you handle questions around comparisons with competitor features and how are you different, right?
Yeah.
So I think two things there, right? You have to kind of think about why is that question coming up, right? Broadly speaking, the good news with competitor questions itself is, they actually, if somebody talks about a competitor saying that, I'm already using this or that or whatever, it actually is a good sign for closing rates, right? So we actually see that win rates improve when people talk about competitors, right? The second thing that we, how do you answer that question? Again, this will come more from our own context, right? The way to handle that question is to help the customer make a more informed decision, right? If you go ahead with just saying, hey, these are the three things at which I'm better, right? You're always leaving something unsaid about what I'm not good at, right? And that is causing you to maybe in some sense lose trust with the customer because they still feel that I need to go and do my own research, right? The second part to it is, and there's a lot of social science data around this, which is to say that if I go and tell someone, hey, these are three things that I'm bad at, right? Because it will be so hard for them to find the fourth and the fifth thing that I'm bad at, that they will think that I'm overall not too bad. All right. People have used this technique in saying that, when you go for an investor meeting, say three reasons why you shouldn't invest in me, right? And actually talk about things that you think are, things that they will probably unearth and anyways discuss when they are trying to talk about you, right? So similarly, I would say that use the same approach for competitors and also mention a few things that you don't do, all right? And, allow people to qualify or disqualify themselves for your product rather than saying, if somebody asks you the question, hey, does this work for a large team of 100 people and saying yes, and does this work for a large team of 5 people and saying yes, maybe if you say that, this works best for teams within size A and B, and here are a couple of reasons why large teams might struggle with this, then that really helps me build trust.
Got it. And it also makes the customer make the decision much faster, as you mentioned as well. So that's also very important. And I think we have one last question from even one of our moderators, and it's Vishal Mehta, and he wants to understand more about the key difference in approaching prospects in North America market versus clients in India. Because that's also one for a salesperson who's handling different regions, that might be one of a difficult nut to crack it, right? Because the messaging would be different and the approach should definitely be different. And your opinion and your findings on that?
Yeah. So I think, of course, one is that there is a big cultural difference, and we're kind of aware of what some of those involve, right? So the first thing is that in India, it is a little bit more relationship driven, right? Not to say that in the US it isn't, but to just say that the relationship comes first, right? And then the decision and the merit sometimes comes second when selling to customers in India. The second part of it is that with customers in the US, they are a little bit more professional as buyers, right? So they understand that you're selling to them. They are upfront about the fact that you're selling to them. They will be proactive in asking you questions, in stating their blockers. When you're selling to customers in India, they will not be comfortable telling you their blockers, right? Because we are just so used to being polite that we find it hard to challenge someone and say, listen, honestly, I don't know whether you'll be around a year later and whether I should buy your product, right? Like, even if that's what I'm thinking while talking to someone. So it's much more important to actually proactively bring out blockers when it comes to the Indian context. And I think the third thing, which is a little bit reverse, which plays in our favor, is that people in India will, you'll be able to find more links to build trust with them, whereas it'll be harder for you to build trust maybe with people in the US, right? Because there won't be that natural network and all of those things, right? So you need to kind of work that much harder to figure out what are the ways in which you're going to build trust, because building trust is definitely important. And so, yeah, whether that's coming up with case studies, doing G2 Crowd reviews, or whatever else, all of that needs to be put into place.
Makes perfect sense. I'm pretty sure the markets work differently across any global region, not just North America and India. And I hope, Vishal, that helps you get some insight. And with that, I think we're almost out of time. We're just on the last minute of our session, and it was really great. There were lots of insights, and I can't emphasize the fact that these are all backed by facts and numbers and data from real-time customers. So these would be definitely useful for your next sales call. So please feel free to try out anything and everything that Shruti just mentioned you. And if you have any questions, please feel free. And there's a poll there as well. So if someone haven't taken that poll, please be our guest and just choose what you feel. So the poll question is, what sales objective do you find the scariest? And the options are budget, timing, competitor. And if you're not interested, you can choose not interested. All right.
And yeah, if any of you want the data or the slides, right, maybe just reach out to us on LinkedIn, tag, basically tag SaaS Insider and me, and I'll be happy to share that.
Yes, please feel free to make use of that as well. And with that, Shruti, I would again want to thank you so much for sparing your time and giving us such an insightful session, and hoping to connect further more on other SaaS Insider sessions in the future as
well. Perfect. Thanks, Anand. Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Everyone have a good time. Please join in for other sessions. I think we have a full day of engagement. See you.